Welcome to this week's edition of Taiwan Outlook. I'm your host, Chi-Chen Lo. In order to win the bid to host the Summer Olympic Games in the year 2008, China promised 7 years ago to improve its human rights situation. So, with the coming of the holding of the Summer Olympic Games in August, there are greater and greater international attention paid to China to promises. So, looking back, is China improving its human rights situation, or is the human rights situation in China deteriorating? These are the problems we're hoping to address today. But if China's human rights situation is deteriorating, what can we do to force China to improve its human rights situation? In today's program, we are very delighted and honored to have two very renowned international human rights activists and lawyers to come to our program. Our first guest is Mr. Georges Beauthier. He's a very renowned Belgian human rights lawyer. Welcome to our program.
Thank you.
And our second guest is Dr. David Matters. He's an attorney, and he's also co-author of a book called Bloody Harvest. Dr. Matters, welcome to our program.
Thanks for having me here.
So, gentlemen, you've been paying a lot of attention to the human rights situation in China. So, looking back, in general, Dr. Matters, do you think that the human rights situation in China is improving or deteriorating?
I would say it's deteriorating. I think the report that I wrote with David Kilgore is an indication of that. In our report, we came to the conclusion that in China, Falun Gong practitioners are being killed for their organs. These are innocent people who've done nothing wrong. The organs are killed from people in detention, taken from people in detention, and they're sold mostly to foreigners, a lot to Taiwanese. And it's been $1 billion a year industry. The harvesting started, we estimate, in the year 2000. The games were awarded in 2001, and at the time, the harvesting was happening, but was not known. But our report came out in 2006, so it's only been public since then. So my own belief is, if it was widely known that this was happening in 2001, then the games would not have been awarded to China. I would say that's one form of deterioration.
And Mr. Beauthier, do you agree with what Dr. Matters just told us, that the situation in China is deteriorating?
Yes, completely agree, because the files of Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International every month recording violation against human rights every month grow bigger, and we give those files to the Belgian or to the European judge, and you can imagine that every month we have, and we had a lot of crimes against humanity perpetrated in China. So we lodge claims, and we want to say to the Chinese authorities that when one member of the government, member of the sinistrous Office 610, who commit a lot of crimes against humanity, when those people are arriving in Europe, we will lodge claim with member of Falun Gong, of Tibetan, of other people, to arrest and first interrogate and then to arrest people, because we have to know that we will not keep our hand in our pocket. We will act, and we will impeach those people to travel freely in Belgium or in Europe.
But many of those human rights abuses in China have been exposed to the outside world. But it seems to me that the international community doesn't really react, strong enough to that kind of human rights abuses in China. Why is that?
Well, it's true. There could be a better reaction. And I think it's got to do with the size, the political and economic power of China. As well as the global propaganda and disinformation campaign it conducts. It is very active in trying to squelch publicity about human rights violations in China. It produces disinformation and falsifies the facts, propaganda, and for a lot of people, they aren't able to sort out the reality of the violations from the propaganda that China churns out. And of course, for a lot of people, it's just politically or economically convenient to go along with China, whatever they say.
That's right. But apparently, as you mentioned, that China has been very forcefully portraying itself to be a human rights lover or a peace lover all over the world. Do you think that China's government has been very successful in presenting a positive or better image over the world?
But I am sure that when the citizen of Europe, of United States, will know that a lot of opponents of China's authorities are harassed by phone call, hacking in the computer, they will understand that the government and that the authorities of China are not really welcome, and certainly they will not respect the human rights. And if you are aware that your neighbor can be hacked, that your neighbor can be harassed by phone call, you will understand that we have to change the situation all together in Europe, in the United States, and we have to change our mentality and say we will not make bargain with China until this violation occurs.
Yeah, but look at the reality. What would be the first most important human rights issue now in China?
Well, from my perspective, because I've written this report with David Kilgore on organ harvesting, I would say that has to be the most important issue.
Why is that?
Because, first of all, the number of people affected is quite large. We're dealing with numbers in the tens of thousands over the span of years. We're dealing with people who are totally innocent and have done nothing wrong, and they're being killed. It's a form of evil we haven't seen anywhere else in the world. I mean, we do get some people selling their organs, but we don't actually get people being drawn off the street, thrown into jail for what they believe, asked to recount, and if they don't, they disappear, and they don't know what's happening to them. I guess you have to say that the right to life is the most basic right of all, and when people are being killed basically for their beliefs and for money, it's a very grave form of human rights violation.
But in response to the international pressures, China, Beijing also passed a new law a few years, some time ago, that they banned the so-called illegal organ harvesting or transplanting. Do you think that's a positive move or just a symbolic move?
Well, I mean, there have been laws in place over the years and changes in the law over the years. In the past, the changes in the laws have been symbolic and hasn't actually changed the volume of transplants, even from abroad. The most recent change does seem to have had an impact, and the anecdotal information we're getting is that the numbers are going down from abroad, that some people who do get to China have had trouble for the first time actually getting transplants. So I think what it tells us that the international campaign that we've been able to mount as a result of our report has had an impact on the behavior of China. It hasn't changed their vocabulary. They still deny everything. But it hasn't removed the problem altogether because, of course, the persecution of Falun Gong still continues. And as well, what we might still rather be seeing is a shift from transplants going abroad to transplants going to needy people in China. China has no reputable sources of organs except in small amounts. They don't have a donation system and they don't have a law which allows for organ harvesting from the brain-dead cardiac alive. So and these are the traditional sources of organs outside of China. So the very fact that they have organ transplants at all without any respectable sources to speak of except for a few donations means that there continues to be a problem in China.
That's right. But in addition to the forced organ harvesting, Mr. Beauthier, do you think there are other priority human rights issues that we should pay attention to?
For example, we got the violation against Falun Gong, the Tibetan, and against trade union. What is important too, it's to remark that they also launch attacks against defenders of those opponents. For example, my colleague Gao Shenzhen disappeared a lot of months ago, and he was a defender of those people. If you put in jail, if you put in camp, defender of opponent, it's a step. And we have to launch campaign in Europe and United States to inform the Bar Association and say what is to be done with defensor of opponents. And it's really important. The second thing is to inform the athlete. We want that the athlete are arriving in China knowing what's happened, not only generally a violation of human rights. We file precise, concrete things, concrete data. We have to show to the athlete that they will run, that they will have a game on the basis of violation of human rights.
We have the luxury to talk about human rights situation in China, outside China, but there are many also human rights lawyers in China that have been under a lot of pressures, or they are even be put in jail for defending some people. How's the human rights lawyer situation now in China, in addition to the law you just mentioned?
Yes, but we don't know. Because if you disappear, if your family doesn't have contact with you, what is to be done? Perhaps some lawyers are dead, perhaps some lawyers are in camp, perhaps they are in jail. We don't know. And that's the important thing that we can do from abroad. We can launch a campaign to say, enough, no, you have to release those people.
Yeah, but the thing you just mentioned is very important. That is, to monitor the human rights situation in China, we had to get the right, correct information. But China is not a very transparent society. Actually, the government controls all the media and so on. What would be the best way that we can get a better idea, more information about the human rights situation in China?
Well, there is, in fact, a lot of information available simply because some victims eventually get out. I mean, there's a lot of torture victims around the world from China who.
And that's not very systematic, right?
Well, you don't get statistics from that,
Yeah.
but you get patterns of behavior.
That's
I mean,
right.
if people tell you at different places and different detention centers what's happening to you, you get an idea. And people are able to make estimates, and it's not the same as official statistics, but it is possible to deduce. And what you have to do, and this is a problem we had to face with our report, is try to collect all the information from various sources and follow evidentiary trails wherever they lead. And as a result, you get a picture drawn up from a combination of different events rather than from just one event. It may be difficult to pick up one book and look at one statistic and tell what's happening, but you're able through interviews and following various evidentiary trails to piece together a picture.
That's right. But will that be very difficult to piece together the real picture about China's human rights?
You have to ask to Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch. I think that they will answer that no, it's a really, really catastrophic situation, and we have to change that.
That's right.
Just before the game, during the game, but certainly after the game, there are a lot of thousands and thousands of people who are in a camp. We are a lot of Falun Gong practitioners who are prosecuted for nothing. We say that. And we have also Tibetan trade unions. It's not enough. We have a list, a complete list of people who are suffer of violation. And we are with a universal tool. The human rights violation have to be ceased, have to be finished.
Apparently, individual efforts will not be good enough. We need international cooperation among different groups, governments, and so on. So when we come back, we will talk about this kind of international efforts to force China to improve its human rights. We'll be right back after this message. Don't go away.